Hey, Slater Crusaders, America's the greatest country in the world. Happy Thursday, best day of the week. What is going on in Michigan? Good night. Okay, so this is what's happening here. And every state's different. It has different names for things. It has different layers of hierarchy and who has authority over what and what geographic areas and to what extent. And it's all tricky and difficult to understand. But here's the gist of it. Wayne County, Michigan, that's Detroit. They have a county election board. There's 2 Democrats, 2 Republicans. This is on Tuesday night, right? Tuesday night. The 2 Republicans refused to certify the election results of Wayne County. And they found too many issues, too many discrepancies, unexplained discrepancies is the official word. Actually, the official word that the media is using, the Detroit Free Press, small unexplained discrepancies. They found too many of them. And they said, we are not going to certify the election results in Wayne County. If they did not, the argument was on Tuesday night that the votes of Detroit wouldn't count and Trump would win the state of Michigan. That's what was at stake here on Tuesday night. Now, what really would have happened is if the county didn't certify it, then it would have gone to a state regulatory board that meets on the 23rd, like Monday or whatever that is. But anyway, at least like the narrative was everything is hanging on the balance of these 2 Republicans right now. So there was a Zoom public comment session. 100 people were exposed to speak, and they ended up opening up to 300 people. And I want to play 2 of them here. So we could play these all day, right? It was many, many hours. But I want to play these 2 comments because of who they're from. And my point of this segment is, this is the next step of the left's tactic, right? It's been a tactic that they've been using for a long time. But this is the next level of it. So I just want us all to get emotionally prepared for it, because can you stand up to this? So I want to play this guy because he is a state rep-elect. So he just won his election just a couple weeks ago to become a state representative in Michigan. Democrat, obviously. Here he is speaking to specifically the 2 Republicans who would not or did not want to certify the election results. Here it is.
Now, let me be also very clear about this. The party that you are a part of had complete control over our state government for 8 years, and they did not do a single thing. So while you may show us your caucasity today in refusing to certify the election and making note that you are okay with certifying all of Wayne County except Detroit, know that we see what's happening. Know that there is nothing other than Jim Crowing that is going on right now. And recognize the facts. The Republican Party's major candidate has sued over 25 times across the country, and he failed. Know the facts. You, as the Board of Canvassers, do not decide who is to be elected. The voters do. Know the facts. You are standing here today telling folks that Black Detroit should not have their votes counted. And know the facts. You are certainly showing that you are a racist. You may say that you are not. You may claim that you are not. But let's be very clear. Your words today and your actions today made it clear that you are okay with silencing the votes of an 80% African-American city.
Stop there. There's more here coming up. So that first part there about Republicans being in charge of the state government in Michigan, and Detroit, and Georgia, and Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania. That's true, and Republicans need to answer for the voting systems that we currently have right now, which is ridiculous. We'll get that to another day. Did you hear that one word he said? Caucasity? Like, what's caucasity? I had to look it up, Urban Dictionary. Caucasity is the audacity of white people, meaning the willingness to take bold risks that only white people feel safe doing. Called it Jim Crowing. And this is the tactic. It wasn't, oh, you are disenfranchising minority votes, which is like a little passive way of saying you're a racist. It is, you are certainly showing that you are a racist. That's the next level of it. So as we play more of these clips, I want you to put yourself in this position. Put yourself in the position of these Republicans here. Are you prepared? Would you be prepared to take these attacks? It is clear. You, Monica Palmer from Grosse Pointe Woods, you are perpetuating the racist history of this country. I think that was the line, right? Then he brings her kids into it. Here it is.
And what that tells us is you, Miss Monica Palmer from Grosse Pointe Woods, which has a history of racism, are deciding to enable and continue to perpetuate the racist history of this country. And I want you to think about what that means for your kids who probably go to Grosse Pointe North. And when they see all their black classmates and they know that.
Goes on. So we've said a couple times on the show that if there's anyone in the country who can stand up to that type of stuff, it's Donald Trump. And that was a vote of confidence. But I don't know how many other people in this country who are willing to or have the courage to stand up to that rhetoric. And that's the left's tactic now. It's in the open. No more talk about dog whistles or whatever. There's nothing subtle about that accusation, right? You are racist. You, Monica Palmer, are racist. And I will call you racist until you back down. Now, before the vote, he wrote on Twitter, he said, Monica Palmer doesn't believe that majority black Detroit deserves the right to have their votes counted. Monica Palmer is a racist. State rep. And just so you know, the amount of scorched earth that they're going for here, even after she and the other Republican voted to certify the results, even after they caved and he got what he wanted, he went on Twitter and he said, Monica Palmer and William Hartman are still racists. So there's nothing you can do to not, once you are deemed a racist by the left, there's nothing you can do to not be a racist, even if you do cave. Play another one. This is Neb Stabler. He's in Detroit. He went to Harvard, then the London School of Economics. He's been on like city mayor advisory boards and different city economic councils and stuff like that. And here he is speaking again to those same two Republicans on the Board of Elections.
We understand, and you now added your name. So I'm not going to try to change your mind. I just want to let you know that the Trump stink, the stain of racism that you, William Hartman, and Monica Palmer have just covered yourself in is going to follow you throughout history. Your grandchildren are going to think of you like Bull Connor or George Wallace. Monica Palmer and William Hartman will forever be known in southeastern Michigan as two racists who did something so unprecedented that they disenfranchised hundreds of thousands of black voters in the city of Detroit because they were ordered to. Probably, I know, Monica, you think Q told you to do it or some other crazy stuff like that. But just know when you try to sleep tonight, that millions of people around the world now on Twitter know the name Monica Palmer and William Hartman as two people completely racist and without an understanding of what integrity means or a shred of human decency. The law isn't on your side, history won't be on your side, your conscience will not be on your side, and Lord knows, when you go to meet your maker, your soul is going to be very, very warm.
About that. So, now listen, if you've ever been to a city council public comment session, you get some pretty interesting people. I didn't choose the two wackiest. Although, right, that's a state rep-elect and a Harvard grad, right? Some people you'd think would otherwise have it together. And here's that, what was that guy? Did he say that he called it the Trump stink? Is that what it was? The stain of racism. It's gonna follow you throughout history. Your grandchildren. Are you strong enough to stand up against that kind of attack? When you try to sleep tonight. Now, here's the update. That was all Tuesday night. Last night, those two Republicans rescinded their vote to certify the election. Now, I don't know how that works, like if you could do that or whatever, but that was what happened late last night is they rescinded their vote to certify the results. So you had these two Republicans who asked very basic, legitimate questions about the election and like things don't match, the numbers don't match up. They got threatened, caved, voted to certify, next day came back and rescinded their vote to certify. So listen, I don't know the full ramifications of that. My point here is this, get ready for this tactic moving forward, even more emboldened. No matter how legitimate, I should say it this way, no matter how illegitimate, how widespread, how fraudulent the votes are, and hopefully the president reveals his argument soon, that's gonna be the rhetoric. You are racist. And here's where your kids go to school, everyone. Just so everyone knows, here's where their kids go to school. Amazing. Can you be shamed? Who's brave enough to stand up against this in the name of the truth? Now, final point on this. The first guy said that Trump made 25 lawsuits so far and lost them all or whatever. That's not how that works. My understanding of this is Trump hasn't made any lawsuits. It's people like allies of Trump have made lawsuits that would benefit him if they won. But anyway, let's not get distracted by all these little skirmishes, right? All that matters is Trump's big reveal, right? And Trump's team, they have one shot to throw the cards down on the table, and we will see if he's been bluffing or if they have a royal flush to prove fraud. And that's the ball game. They have a single reel. Trump's team's got one chance. And if they can't clearly make the case when they make their big reveal, then it is over and I will move on. And as David Harsanyi told us yesterday, there will be many more elections that conservatives can be disappointed about in the future to come. But Trump's team's got one shot. These other little lawsuits here and there, they don't matter that much. We are waiting for, as Sidney Powell said, the Kraken to be released. The single big reveal. And if they have the goods, it goes to the Supreme Court and the legislatures will react accordingly. If they're bluffing, it's over. We'll see. What happened in Michigan the other day is just a little taste of what the left has for you. Can you feel the healing? Can you just feel all the healing? Goldman Sachs just announced they see gold prices next year rising to $2,300 an ounce. It's been about $1,900, a little under $1,900 today, so that's a 22% increase. Why? Inflation. So Goldman Sachs sees inflation of 3%, and that is what drives the price of gold. And there is no way, I don't care, you can be the most highly trained economist or just a regular person with a lick of common sense. You don't need formal education to see that when you print unprecedented amounts of money and you pass multiple trillion-dollar spending bills, just a little perspective, the auto bailouts of 2008, like one of the things that spurred the Tea Party movement, that was $80 billion. It was chump change. $80 billion? We got COVID bills that are trillions of dollars, and we've had many of them. Of course, this leads to inflation. Also, local town, city, and state government tax revenues are way down. It's all gonna hit the fan. It's gonna be a huge mess. And everyone's ignoring it or not. I don't know what's going on, but you're not. If you have gold, you could be protected from this and then even benefit from it too. Patriot Gold Group, A+, Better Business Bureau. Listen, I'm not gonna tell you about an okay gold dealer. These guys are the best. Any questions you have, give them a call. Patriot Gold Group, 1-800-798-4260, 1-800-798-4260. Get gold or silver and silver in your possession today. PatriotGoldGroup.com. Spread the word. Hey, Slater Crusaders, I got a local story out of San Diego. La Jolla Country Day School. This is a private school in San Diego. La Jolla is the richest part of San Diego. It's right there on the ocean. Mitt Romney lives here. His house 10 years ago was $12 million. It has an elevator for his car. Okay, so it's that kind of neighborhood. This school, La Jolla Country Day, costs $37,000 a year to go to. All right, here's the email. So I got an email. This is the email that the principal, head of schools, sent to all the teachers. All right, didn't send it to the students or the parents, sent this to all the teachers. I got a hold of it. The email says, first it talks about some COVID stuff. And then it says, we also had a student wear a MAGA hat today. I've talked to that student who now understands why that hat is offensive to our community. He will not wear it again. In addition, his mom said that she's embarrassed by his actions. Check out this line, she will fulfill her role as a parent. We will continue to grow as a community that sees and values the dignity of all people, except for Trump supporters, apparently. What a weird, the whole thing is so odd. She will fulfill her role as a parent. So I've reached out to the principal. a couple times. The update we have is that the principal sent another email out wanting to know who sent that email to the media, and they're having a big meeting with all the high school students, so he's going to step in it again, which is great. The reason I bring this up is I want to use just as an example of how one could play, how we could use the left's game against them, okay? They want to play this game, like we talked about in the last segment, calling everyone a racist all the time. You want to play that game? Great, let's do it. That's the line of attack against you. Monica Palmer is a racist because she wants to make sure all the votes are counted and everything looks legit, right? You are a racist. Doesn't matter what the issue is, you are a racist. So let's play the game, all right? So Dr. Cron is the headmaster, their head of schools. He's offended by the MAGA hat. The MAGA hat is offensive. Okay, what's offensive about it? What's offensive about a MAGA hat? So when I think Donald Trump, there's two main things that I think of. I think of President Trump's decision to end Barack Obama's kids in cages policy at the border. Barack Obama started this policy of putting kids in cages. Trump ended it. I support ending it. So if you're against that, that means you want kids in cages? Wow, so you want us to go back to putting Mexican kids in cages. Wow, that's quite racist of you, doctor. Why do you, doctor, so badly want to put Mexican children back in cages? That sounds terrible. I mean, you're offended by Trump ending the policy, so I mean, it's good to know. I'm just curious why you hate Mexicans so much. Why do you want Mexican children to suffer in cages at the border? I think we deserve an answer to that, Mr. Principal. The second thing I think of with Trump is his criminal justice reform, his First Steps Act. Right? That's a program to help people get out of prison a little early who deserve it, and they can get back on with their lives. And it mostly helps black men. So if you're offended by that, doctor, right? If you find that offensive, then it must mean you don't want black men back on the streets. Wow, I didn't know you hate black people so much. Do your students know that you hate black people? Do your students know that you prefer to have black men in prison? Wow. I guess the question is it all? Do you want all black men in prison or just the ones who have been treated unjustly by the Democratic-controlled justice system? I don't know. It'd be nice to know some answers from the principal. It's just strange to have someone who hates black people run a private school. I feel like especially students of color deserve an answer as to why their principal is against criminal justice reform that specifically helps black men. So, I mean, I don't know what else to gather from this. I mean, he's not answering my questions to him. I asked him if he wants to comment. So the only thing I can think is he's ashamed of his position of hating Mexicans and black people. But it's good to know where he stands. You see the game? We can play it too. If you want to play, I don't want to play that game. That's a ridiculous game to play. But if you want to, I'm down. All this talk of being offended. Give me a break. It's offensive to the people of our community. What community? The richest, whitest bubble in California? The richest, whitest bubble in the country? You're offended by Trump? Give me a break. It's one thing to disagree with policy, of course. But the left, they just jump right over to that and they're offended. Everyone in La Jolla is shaken to their core over this student and his MAGA hat. People on the left have lost all sense of proportion. And that's what I hear when I saw like those two clips that we played in the last segment from the state rep-elect and the other guy in town talking about how you're going to hell and like all of history will know your name. It's like, geez, guys, like slow down a bit, all right? You've lost your sense of proportion. And that's one of the main goals of this show, is to try and bring perspective to things. And I think perspective brings peace, right? It's easy to get there's all these other media outlets to try to get you ramped up, right? Hopefully we try to bring perspective, and that just brings some peace. And part of perspective is having a proper sense of proportion. So one of my favorite books is Robert Greene's 48 Laws of Power. It's a must read. Rule 18 is do not build fortresses to protect yourself. Isolation is dangerous. Okay. And he tells a couple stories to prove this point here. He says, the world is this is Robert Greene. The world is dangerous. Enemies are everywhere. Everyone has to protect themselves. A fortress seems the safest, but isolation exposes you to more dangers than it protects you from. So he gives a bunch of different stories to prove this point. I think a nice visual that we could share here is 1545. One of the Medicis commissioned a fresco inside of a church in Florence. And he picked this painter, Jacopo da Pontermo. And Pontermo was an old guy, and he wanted this to be his grand masterpiece, and he was going to cement his legacy with this beautiful fresco. So the first thing he did is he shut off all the walls and windows and everything to the chapel. He wanted no one to witness what he was doing. At one point, someone broke in, and then he sealed it off even more. He worked on this fresco for 11 years. Can you imagine that? 11 years. And he did it, right? It was creation, Adam and Eve, Noah's Ark, Judgment Day, the whole thing. He almost never left the chapel. He developed this phobia of human contact, became super paranoid. He was afraid his ideas would be stolen. He totally isolated himself inside of this chapel, and he died before he finished. I show a picture of it, but it doesn't exist anymore, this fresco. But a friend of his at the time obviously saw the fresco and wrote about it. Let me quote Robert Greene. There was a total lack of proportion. Scenes bumped against scenes, figures in one story being juxtaposed with those in another in maddening numbers. Pontormo had become obsessed with detail, but had lost any sense of the overall composition. His friend left off his description of the frescoes by writing that if he continued, meaning if the friend continued writing about them, I think I would go mad and become entangled in this painting, just as I believe that in the 11 years of time Jacopo spent on it, he entangled himself and anyone else who saw it. Instead of crowning his career, the work became his undoing. All right, here's the metaphor. Those frescoes were visual equivalents of the effects of isolation on the human mind. A loss of proportion, an obsession with detail combined with an inability to see the larger picture, a kind of extravagant ugliness that no longer communicates. Artists who hold themselves up in their fortress lose a sense of proportion, their work communicating only to their small circle. La Jolla Country Day. Such art remains cornered and powerless. You see the metaphor? Again, I brought up La Jolla Country Day just because that's a specific example, right? So it's them specifically, like that's a little microcosm. La Jolla more generally, but the left more broadly, right? That's the bigger story here. And we could go on from there. But it's this siloing, this isolation. It causes people to lose their sense of proportion. And that's why you get hysteria at the littlest nothing. As opposed to maybe there was a policy like you can't wear political paraphernalia at school, so it'd be like, hey kid, you gotta take the hat off. Okay, boom, done, right? That's it. But it's not. It's, I talked to him. He realizes how his mom is embarrassed. It'll never happen again. We will continue to, it's like, whoa, man, relax. Now, losing your sense of proportion, that problem can be solved two ways. First, talk to people. Instead of attacking, you could start by maybe talking to the kid wearing a MAGA hat. Instead of attacking them and calling their mommy and shaming her, talk, ask why you support Trump or whatever the issue is, right? Another way to solve this problem is to read a book. I can recommend 1,000 books of people in times in history that would make this headmaster feel ashamed for thinking that he has it so tough at La Jolla Country Day School in America in 2020. I don't know what other books they're reading or what they're doing for $37,000 a year at La Jolla Country Day, but you couldn't pay me $37,000 to send my kids there. Home Title Lock. Home Title Lock is a monitoring service for your home title. You think, well, what do I need this for? If someone steals your title at the county registrar's office, and do you really think the folks down at the county's office have some crack security system in place? So if someone steals your title, they forge a quit deed of your home. And they start taking out loans against your home until all your equity is gone. And you have no idea this is happening because the county is your guard dog for your home title and they're asleep. And then you are responsible for the bills and the lawsuit that follows. So with Home Title Lock, you put some real guard dogs in charge of monitoring your home title. So if anyone does anything with it, you are immediately notified and you can put the kibosh on it right there. If it goes to court, Home Title Lock will cover up to $500,000 in lawyer fees, and they have their entire team to fight for you, and they do this all day. So that saves you just an infinite amount of headache and hassle. That's Home Title Lock. It's what they do. It's just part of the deal of owning a house. I'm sure you've had your credit card stolen. We've all had that happen. That's no problem. All right, you get your credit card stolen, you call the credit card company, they don't charge you for anything, and you get a new credit card. That's not how it works with your home title. This is 1,000 times more of a hassle. And Home Title Lock takes that worry off your plate forever. Nothing to worry about. HomeTitleLock.com. You can register your address now, see if you're already a victim, and then use the promo code RADIO. You get 30 days of free protection. HomeTitleLock.com. Hey, Slater Crusaders. So everybody's very excited about the two new vaccines, Pfizer and Moderna, and that's wonderful news, but not a lot of people are thinking about the next step, which is making it and then getting it to people. That is a massive logistical hurdle. So who's our logistics guy, the logistics expert? You got to follow him, Man Integrated on Twitter. C. Kennedy's a senior fellow at Security Studies Group. Kennedy, how are you, man?
I'm doing fantastic, man. How are you, Mike?
Good. Walk us through the process here. What are some of the major hurdles of getting these vaccines to people?
So vaccines ship in sort of a range of temperature requirements, but all of them at some level are cold chain. The gold standard is if you can get to something that, you know, is +2 to +8 Celsius, which is refrigerator temps. Most of them require a deeper cold chain, which is down to about -20 Celsius, which is what a commercial freezer, what you would store meat in, or medicines that need to stay cold, things like that. Just a commercial freezer. Pfizer, though, in addition to mRNA vaccines being kind of a new thing, has done theirs in such a way that it requires a extreme deep freeze capability. And if they are outside of that for a certain period of time, then the vaccine it becomes non-viable. And that is a -70 to 80 Celsius. And there's only about 2 to 3 ways you can really maintain at that temperature. So it's liquid nitrogen, which requires its own supply chain and its own really specialized equipment, or it is constant dry ice, which dry ice is just frozen CO2. But the problem with dry ice is that the second you make it, it starts sublimating, and which means it goes directly from a solid state to a gas. And that requires its own form of supply chain, packaging, things like that. So Pfizer's solution was to build their own special packaging, which I haven't been able to get my hands on one, although I'd like to see one and test it for myself. But they claim that it will be able to keep the product at -80 C, and if you don't break the seal on the box, for up to 10 days, which is an adequate amount of time to fly it from the manufacturing facility, even to Los Angeles or Tacoma or even over to Europe. But that's assuming that an untested vaccine and untested shipping solution will work perfectly in the middle of a pandemic.
Wow, that's amazing. So yeah, I remember so by the way, it's about 112 degrees, -112 Fahrenheit, which is like crazy. Right. So yeah, the Pfizer guy said that they have their own little boxes with their own GPSs and thermometers in it to make sure that it maintains that temperature the entire time. So then the other question is well, let's say you open it at the CVS. How long can it stay outside of that temperature before it loses its significance? But what do you think? Is that possible? Is that supply chain possible as you see it?
It is so JIT or just in time that you eliminate all margin of error with an extraordinarily expensive, important product. The biggest challenge is going to be maintaining that cold chain of custody from, I believe they're manufacturing at their old plant up in Michigan and up around Kalamazoo. And so they're going to have to, the second it's produced and it leaves the frozen environment at the time of production, then it's going to have to be in those cold chain boxes. It's going to be flown somewhere. It's going to be taken off the plane. It's going to have to be, again, they're going to have to check the temperature, make sure everything's good to go. And then they're going to have to hand that off down to a series of warehouses or trucking companies to get it to the pharmacy or get it to the doctors and hospitals. Everything has to go flawlessly, and we're talking about scaling something that normally is. This is not unknown to the pharmaceutical industry to have to do this, but to do it at this scale, when logistics capacity in the United States is already completely crunched. We're coming into Black Friday. We're coming into Christmas shopping season. The ports are an absolute disaster because there's so much demand trying to get products in. Air freight is not quite at the levels it was at the beginning of the pandemic when everything was being flown, the PPE. But we're talking about some serious structural issues, and then we're going to try to layer on top of it a vaccine rollout that's intended to hit 300 million Americans. So that's why so Pfizer has come up with a solution that will be workable in some cases. If you're sending it to Chicago, if you're sending it to New York City or LA, where warehousing facilities and hospitals that have that capability to manage it are there, they'll be fine. But Aunt Edna in Central Arkansas is probably not going to be high on the list of available recipients for the Pfizer vaccine. So that's where my bet is that we're going to see 3, 4, even 5 vaccines in the market that have varying levels of cold chain requirements, and that eventually you're going to see 1 or 2 of these emerge based on distribution and infrastructure. I don't think the average person's vaccine that they choose to receive is going to end up being one that is the easiest to transport to them, not necessarily the one that's the most efficacious.
Wow, it's amazing. So I'm amazed by logistics, mostly because we never think about it. We just go to Target and there's all the things. So for you to outline the steps necessary is enlightening, and I love it. So give me an example of maybe something or a few things that could go wrong along that chain that would screw up a box, which the CEO said has somewhere between 1,000 or 5,000 vials vaccines in it. So what's something that could go wrong amongst all those hands that are touching it?
Well, rough handling of the box themselves. These are not big boxes. They're about 20 inches by 20 inches by 24 to 27 inches tall. And so the bottom of them is just going to be a package that's designed to hold a giant, block of dry ice, basically. And then stacked above it will be racks of the vaccines, of the vials of vaccines. So you're talking about rough handling of relatively small containers. Something tips over in a truck, right? You probably lost 5,000 doses, which is enough to vaccinate 2,500 people. Where these things tend to go wrong, the spoilage rate, and I forget what term they use in the pharmaceutical industry, but basically the rate of loss on an average vaccine is between 5 and 20%. Because
From what?
Just you're talking about like a flu vaccine or whatever. Usually it's because the cold chain's broken. A truck breaks down in the middle of nowhere with a whole bunch of doses on it, and they have, they're nowhere near a dry ice replenishment capability, or it takes them a while to get the truck repowered or whatever it may be. So usually the wheels fall off, usually in those transition phases, right? Your issue's not going to be when it's in flight. Your issue's probably not going to be when it's trucking. It's going to be that the plane touched down and 3 of the crew, 3 of the people that normally would be at work that know how to do this are gone because they're sick with COVID or whatever it may be. And so you've got a new crew. And so it's the human humans are almost always in these things a single point of failure, not the technology, not the infrastructure.
Wow, that's amazing. As we've heard the president talk about the military's involvement with this, what is their role? Could they improve this? Could they make it more backed up, or what do they do in this game?
So Operation Warp Speed fundamentally has been under the jurisdiction of the logistics team, of a group of people that were brought together out of the logistics disciplines in the Pentagon, and then civilians, of course, as well. And they've also had a working group that involves McKesson, UPS, FedEx, all fantastic companies. In fact, the company that employs me is a very large service provider for the import side for McKesson. So I've got some familiarity and visibility into what their own supply chain looks like. They're really great at what they do. They truly are. We've just never attempted something quite at this scale with these super tight requirements. So the Army got brought in. The Army does mobilization really, really, really well. So does the Navy. I mean, the United States military, for maybe all of the drawbacks of how it's structured and all the infighting over budgets and all that, we move a lot of stuff really, really well when we have to mobilize. And so they brought in a really strong logistician to run the project. They built the software, I think it's called Tiberius, kind of from the ground up to use as a supply chain control tower. And it is, they're going to strip out as much as they possibly can of the margin of error. But their challenge is going to be, how do we remove all margin of error? And you really can't.
Where would they step in that process? Would they step in? Would they take it right from the manufacturers and send it to middle of Arkansas, or what would they do?
I mean, it's sort of wide open as to what could theoretically, work. I mean, there were plans early on that they were going to take, Air Force C-130 cargo planes and turn them into flying refrigerators, right? And then they were going to take the reefer trailers that the Army has for food and for medical supplies, and reefer being refrigerated, and they can go down to frozen temperatures, and utilize them. And really, what it's going to come down to is if UPS and FedEx completely fall apart, and they're very experienced professionals when it comes to pharmaceutical supply chains, but we're talking about scale here. How do we scale at a level we've never done as fast as we've ever done it? So you may end up seeing the Army have to step in and play a bit more of a direct management role, utilizing National Guard facilities, for example, utilizing Walmart's facilities, right? Particularly for, and I'm not saying I have some special secret knowledge, but if I was them, I would be saying identify every single cold storage facility in the United States. I don't care if it's a grocery store, if it's a pharmacy, if it's a Walmart, a Target, whatever it may be. If it's got the ability to freeze down to -20, or for some time maintain a -80 by managing dry ice, we need to be using that.
That's
That's where the Army could do that.
Yeah, we got to run here. Give me 30 seconds. Can you put in perspective the scale? You talk about how it's such a massive scale. What does that mean? What is this scale, and what are things we normally do? In terms of scale, when you think about 300 million people, and I think Moderna and Pfizer's vaccines both require they're both a 2-dose. You take a dose, and then a week later you take a second dose. So what you're talking about here is being able to, in the next year, get to where 350 million people, or however many are and this is just in the U.S. Pfizer and Moderna and all the others are also going to be trying to sell into the global market at some point. So you're talking about 350 million people, that's 700 million doses, these little bitty vials that require a constant cold storage transportation capability from the time they're manufactured to the time they're delivered. You're talking about trying to get it to people out in the hinterlands of Kansas, deep South Georgia, northern Minnesota, right? So not everybody lives close to major cities, right? And so if you're trying to get to everybody, you're talking about a vast final mile distribution network and capability. And really only UPS, FedEx, DHL, and Amazon have really built that sort of capability in. So obviously to getting it to the cold chain. Yeah. So what about what's another thing that we give out to a lot of people, that we currently do, but as you said, not even necessarily cold chain?
flu vaccines are pretty close. As far as I think there's like 150 million doses a year issued of flu vaccines. And most of those do require a -20 cold chain. So every pharmacy is going to be set up to handle a -20, or almost every pharmacy. So the problem scales down a lot less if we're talking just about Moderna or some of these other solutions. But if you're talking about your first rollout, it's going to be Pfizer. It's simply not feasible to construct enough of these boxes to manage that amount of dry ice to ship and transport everywhere without there being a pretty high degree of spoilage.
Man, unbelievable! Like the science to even make one, but then the engineering. So the scientists to invent one, the engineering to make enough of them, and then the logistics to get them to people. It's awesome. It's literally awe-inspiring.
It is.
Kennedy, hey, we got to run. See Kennedy Huntsman on the Twitter. Thanks, man. I know we'll talk again.
Thanks, Mike. Take care.
Nice, dude. Have a great day. Amazing, amazing, amazing. True story. Mike Slater, spread the word. Hey, Slater Crusaders. So the other day we talked about it was like Chuck Schumer's idea or Joe Biden, but it's been an idea from the left for a long time now. This student debt cancellation, up to $50,000, and they're saying they can do it just with an executive order. Elizabeth Warren again's talked about $1.25 trillion. For a little perspective, the auto bailouts back in 2008 were $80 billion. This is $1.25 trillion. Unbelievable. Beth AKERS is here. She's a senior fellow at the wonderful Manhattan Institute. Beth, how are you today?
Hi, I'm good. Thanks so much for having me this morning.
Yeah. So what was your first take when you heard this idea coming from the left again?
Well, so, this has been an idea that's been floating around from Democrats for several years now. When I first heard it several years ago, I thought it was crazy pie in the sky, never going to come to the table as a real policy discussion. And here we are today, coming into the Democratic primary. We had Democrats floating this as part of their platform, and now we're seeing it reinvigorated and being proposed as coming through an executive order, which is, incredibly bold. And the thing that I'm primarily concerned about with this policy is that it's delivering huge benefits to people who are already amongst the most well-off in our economy. We've been primed by popular media coverage of student debt to think of people with student loans as just, victims of this predatory system. The reality is that the more debt you have, the less likely you are to have financial hardship. That's because when you get into those high debt figures, we're talking about lawyers, doctors, MBAs. These are people with big debts, but also huge earnings potential. So the story is just not what most people believe it to be on student debt. And I think it's leading people towards this really bad policy solution.
My understanding is it 56% of the debt are graduate degrees? As you're speaking of, I mean, that's insane that I would have to pay off someone's med school loans. Like, what's that about?
Exactly. So, there was this really great study that looked at the amounts that were talked about in newspaper stories about student loan debt. And everyone had like $85,000, $100,000. The average amount that someone has finishing an undergraduate program is about $30,000. And that's largely because there are caps on federal lending that keep people to that limit. So if we're talking about a $50,000 cap on student loan forgiveness, that's getting really far into the amount of debt that people are taking on for graduate school. And again, these are the high earners. The people that we really do actually need to be concerned about in the economy with student debt right now are those who started school and didn't finish. And believe it or not, they've actually got really small balances, but are still struggling to repay. That's because maybe they started a semester at a community college, borrowed for their living expenses, and then they don't have the degree or the certificate, so they don't have that earnings bump that helps them repay their debt. Yeah. And so, those people would be helped, but the tremendous cost of this is really being driven by those huge benefits that would get paid out to some of the highest earners in our economy.
Yesterday, we talked about, one of your colleagues at the Manhattan Institute wrote an article called The Chump Effect, talking about people who did the right thing, either didn't take on student loans or worked extra hard to pay them off, and they're the ones who are going to get screwed because they're not going to get their money back for paying it off. But so it's that, and then it's also, I get frustrated at this because it doesn't address the root causes of why college tuition is going up so much. And if anything else, it just makes it even worse right? Because now it's a massive moral hazard. People are going to take on more debt, and these universities just keep getting richer and richer. I'm so sick of these hedge funds that pretend to be universities, and they're just pocketing all this cash, right?
Yeah, so there's no doubt that if we had some sort of jubilee right now with student loans, that if I'm running a college, I'm going to start, being less shy about raising my prices in the future, because I can kind of like wink and nudge to my students that they're probably not going to have to pay back anything that they borrow. We already see that happening for some graduate programs where students already can have debt forgiven. And so there's precedent for this. We know this is going to happen. The financing of higher ed is so convoluted for young people in this country that's already hard for them to make like really, prudent, careful financial decisions. And so this is just piling on and making it much worse. And I think it's definitely going to lead to more tuition inflation in the future. Though I should say part of what, Democrats have in mind with this is that it's going to be coinciding with making public colleges free at the same time. So that would give students a path forward to not have to take on as much debt, but good to keep in mind too that a lot of the reason people are borrowing these big sums is to pay for their living expenses, which would still be a problem under a free college regime.
Very, very good point. Okay, could this even be done by executive order, or is that a bridge too far? And do you think, I think you kind of answered the question, do you think they really want to do this, the left, or is this just to, get votes?
Well, hey, it's popular. Obviously this is a popular policy among people with student debt, right? That's no surprise. They have a lot to gain. But what's surprising to me was that this is actually a really popular policy even among people who don't have student debt or didn't even go to college. So we've definitely convinced people in this country that student debt is some sort of hardship trap, which it's really not if you look at the data. Whether they should do this with through an executive order, whether they can do it, I don't know. I don't think they should do it for sure. It's a tremendous amount of money. A scholar from the Brookings Institution, a left-leaning think tank, just published the other day that this would amount to more spending than we've had in terms of direct cash welfare transfers to people since 1980. So, it's just sort of crazy to think of doing this without a full debate taking place in Congress. So, legal scholars are disagreeing at the moment about whether or not it could be done. I'm of the mind that there'll probably be a lot of barriers to getting it done, but I could see them making it happen.
Yeah, wow, okay. All right, great perspective, and I love thinking about what this debt really is as opposed to popular perception. Really good. Beth AKERS, Senior Fellow at the Manhattan Institute. Thanks, Beth.
Thanks for having me.
Appreciate you. Have a great day. That's it. Show's over. Do it tomorrow. Tomorrow we're going to talk about, among other guests, we're going to talk to someone who was on Bush's legal team back in 2000 in Florida and get all the details about that and if there's any precedent for what happened then with what is upcoming still now with the president. We'll do that all tomorrow. True story. Mike Slater, spread the word.